all. It's going to be quite the night. I've been charged with introducing the man, in my opinion, who is the ultimate historian on Saginaw County sports. I would like to call him the godfather of Saginaw County sports. In the year of 2002, is that correct? 2002, that's when your book came out. He blessed us with a book that he authored and called The Glory, the History of Saginaw County Sports. It's an amazing book. If you don't got it, grab it. It's That's how I first got introduced to this. And we've worked together, community on different boards with the Saginaw County Sports Hall of Fame board, where he served for 19 years. He's our president emeritus, our active president for the Saginaw County Sports Hall of Fame for 14 years. He's an amazing person. Right now, he's a Saginaw County commissioner. He loves the Saginaw County community. He loves Saginaw County athletics. He's a great asset to us all. He's been a sports editor and columnist for several regional publications. The one that comes to mind the most for me is the Saginaw Township Times. He's a great person. He's a gem in our community. With no further ado, Mr. Jack Tanny.
Thank you. Terry Urick introduced me. He called me up. He says, Jack, how much can we pay you to come to this letter winners? I said, how much do you want me to pay you? Those four individuals I'm going to be chatting with one at a time up here. All four of them are my friends. All four of them are in the Arthur Hill Letter Winners Hall of Fame. All four of them are in the Saginaw County Sports Hall of Fame, which is a mouthful. First thing I like to do when I get started, before I get started, seven individuals from that 3 team who aren't with us anymore. Assistant coach Ed Perriard, Ron Rummel, Greg Branch, Doug Dijak, Scott MacArthur, David Foy, and Greg Grandy. Can we have a moment of silence for those 7 individuals? Thank you. I would be remiss if I did not tell Scott MacArthur's story. Scott MacArthur was a friend of mine, went to school at Zmilwaukee together, and went camping with Scott, John Plowdry, another buddy, and myself went to Higgins Lake camping. And John and Scott were in a camper. I was in a tent with my other buddy, and we stayed around a campfire, drinking Red Pops till 4 in the morning. Next morning, John Plowdry comes out of the camper. Anybody seen Scott? Nobody could find Scott. The vehicles were still there. Somebody went down to the beach, he wasn't there. Somebody went down to showers, he wasn't there. So we're just sitting around getting a little worried about Scott MacArthur. And sat down in some lawn chairs. We started talking, heard this noise. Looked up, and Scott MacArthur's sleeping in a tree. So we got to do something because he could fall and break every bone in his body. So we're throwing pebbles, we're throwing sticks, we're throwing red pop cans at him. Try to wake him up. To no avail. So finally, he wakes up. He did one of these numbers, woke himself up, shimmied down the tree, and come over to the campfire where we're standing. The hell are you guys looking at? And that was Scott MacArthur. Loved him to death. And then he opened up the cooler and we started drinking Red Pops again. So, I always start with a trivia question. Love trivia. Love sports trivia. I'm going to toss out a trivia question. If you know the answer to this, raise your hand. Don't blurt it out. In 1962, George Eiler set the Western Michigan University record, 3 interceptions in one game. Raise a hand if you know what team that was against. Marshall is correct. How did you remember that? Wow. President of the George Eiler fan club, right there. I've got, from the distillery in Saginaw, I've got a bottle of vodka for you. This will take paint off your car, I guarantee it. All right. We're going to do this in alphabetical order. I'm going to invite these gentlemen up. And guys, don't take this big step here. Their steps are right around here. I'm going to invite you to sit down. And Jeff will help get you mic'd up. And yep. First gentleman I want to introduce is Mr. John Decker.
Okay, thank you.
I want to thank Jeff Cottrell. Jeff Cottrell from the Saginaw County Sports Hall of Fame brought these trophies, brought those jerseys. That's Bob Trout's varsity letter sweater from 1945 over there. That's Kurt Young's Oakland A's uniform from the Earthquake World Series, 88. This is one of my favorite photos of all time. This is my friend Craig Dill going up against Brian Best from Saginaw High. Brian Best was a three-sport athlete, ended up playing baseball at Western Michigan. And in the background, Ernie Thompson and Dennis Schumacher. What a tremendous photo. What a tremendous photo. John, if you want to have a seat.
Thank you.
So the last time I saw John was at Saginaw Valley. Jack, I need your cell phone. I want to text you some photos. He texted me some photos of some monuments from a cemetery in Texas. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, I still have them.
Yep.
I need them.
So do I. Why were you in a cemetery in Texas?
I was there with my wife, and I was just exploring the town and heard that this was a really cool cemetery in Austin, and I thought that you would be interested because of the athletes who were quoted. So.
Huge monuments. Don Baylor, Lamb Jones, Tom Landry. These monuments were huge. And Jack, I got to get you these photos. Very cool.
By the way, I wasn't sure whether to sit here or there because I didn't want to take the Godfather's seat. You know, you're dressed like the Godfather.
Cliff, you know I'm Italian, right? All right. All right. John Decker grew up in Saginaw, multi-sport athlete, and you're going to hear that a couple times today. But you won a junior city tennis title. A junior, is there a sport you didn't try? Football, basketball, track, tennis.
Well, I play a lot of golf now, but I consider golf to be a game and not a sport because I consider a sport to be anything that I can do well.
So, 7 varsity letters at Arthur Hill, pole vaulted 13 feet. That's very impressive. Very impressive. For the Hillite football team, played quarterback, defensive back, punter, kicker, return kicks, return punts. You never left the field. What do you remember most about that time?
Well, I would say, you know, I don't want to personalize it because I really don't remember very many plays from any of my career. You know, I can remember the bad plays, but the good ones I can't. So, but the whole, I think, and you'll probably hear this from the others, that the privilege, I'll call it, of being able to play and compete in the Saginaw Valley Conference was, in retrospect, one of the greatest thrills of my life because there were so many tremendous athletes at the time, and you didn't really notice it because you were too busy taking care of your own business, but there were some phenomenal athletes, and the opportunity to be able to compete, and in our case to be successful was the thing I remember most.
That was precisely my next question is, when you played basketball, you played against all of Flint schools were good. Pontiac Central was good. Is there a player that you remember most from that time?
Basketball player?
Yep.
From, well, yeah, but he was not he was a good basketball player, but he was an even better track athlete. His was Flint Central, and that was the worst memory because I missed a 1-and-1 with 29 seconds to go in the game against Flint Central in the last game of the regular season that cost us the Valley title. So that's my bitter memory that I obviously y'all can understand. But there was a guy named Friels Bacon, and that year Central went on, after we played them, they went on to play for the state championship against one of the Detroit schools that had Spencer Haywood and Ralph Simpson, and they got annihilated, but they were a good team. But Friels Bacon was such a good athlete that at the Valley track championships at Saginaw High, I can remember this like it was yesterday, he was a high jumper, and he passed at every height, never jumped until everybody else was out of the competition. Then he said, set the bar at 6'10", and he cleared it on his first try in his sweats. Yeah. That's a true story.
So when you were growing up as a kid, did you have an idol? Is there somebody you tried to emulate? Favorite athlete?
Al Kaline. Yeah, that's the only one, or Gordie Howe. But I didn't play hockey, and I stopped playing baseball after I was in the 9th grade. So I had lots of football players that I admired and everything like that. But the two I mentioned are the ones that were my childhood heroes.
John, you graduated in 1967, and at that time, there were racial tensions around the country, around the state, around Detroit, around Saginaw. What is your best recollection of that time?
Well, yeah, it was difficult, and Craig and I were talking about him going down. My law school alma mater is Duke, and Craig telling me about going down there and playing Duke in Durham, and the kinds of the treatment that the black players on his team, I mean, Cassie Russell and stuff like that, they're throwing stuff out there. So that was in the South, but still here, right after I graduated high school, my brother Kip is here. He may remember that there was a fire. It was during, I think, the bad times in 1968. On the east side of Saginaw, there was a restaurant that was burning, and I took them over there to watch it, and we kind of got chased away. And it was then that I kind of, really realized what a difficult, situation it was, and what a troubled world we were living in. The restaurant was on East Genesee somewhere. Maybe somebody remembers.
So you received a football scholarship at the University of Nebraska, coached by Bob Devaney, another Arthur Hill graduate. Did Bob recruit you?
Yes. Yep. He showed up in my living room one day, and it was kind of, after that, the rest of it was history.
Now, back in the day, freshmen weren't eligible to play. They actually had freshman football teams. But you found immediate success. On that freshman team, you were undefeated. And then went up to the varsity, 3-year letter winner at Nebraska. And the record over 3 years is 26-6-1. What a time to be at Nebraska, including a 19-game winning streak. Why were those teams so good?
Well, the foundation, we had a couple of tough years. My freshman year and sophomore year, Nebraska went 6-4, and Bob Devaney was being hung in effigy in Lincoln. So he was teetering on the the brink of excuse me, some really bad stuff. So the team that really kind of laid the foundation was the '69 team, and we were Big 8 champions that year actually, and we started off 2-2, won 7 straight to win the conference, and then or 6 straight, and then we played Georgia in the Sun Bowl, and we just annihilated them. And Vince Dooley was quoted in Sports Illustrated as saying, "That's the best team in the country." And we really had a good team. So that kind of set the stage for 1970. We also had, Coach Devaney had a tremendous group of assistant coaches. Tom Osborne was our offensive coordinator. Monty Kiffin was our defensive coordinator. And there were other coaches who went on to be head coaches at major Division I programs from that staff. So Coach Devaney kind of laid the groundwork for all that, and all the credit is due to him. But it was a combination of that. We got some great athletes. We got Johnny Rogers and guys like that. It's, I think, Terry, the Notre Dame team that you guys had, there are a lot of things that have to fit together in order to make a championship team.
But those teams, I mean, when you were there, a member of 2 Big 8 championship teams, played in the Sun Bowl, the national championship team, you played in the Orange Bowl. So when you were in Saginaw and you were heading out to Nebraska, did you realize what kind of program Nebraska had at that time?
Well, I thought they had a good program until they played Alabama in the Sugar Bowl that year against Snake Stabler and those guys, and they lost 34-6. So I thought, maybe I'm not going the right direction here. But all's well that ends well, and I never would have dreamed that I'd go there and 4 years later would be getting a ring. So it was all good.
So tell me about the Nebraska-Oklahoma rivalry. That's one hell of a rivalry.
Yeah, and it's sad that they don't have it anymore. But it's just a fierce rivalry that went way back, and it really was always there. But when it kind of ripened, when Coach Devaney was there, Chuck Fairbanks was the coach at Oklahoma at the time, and then Osborne and Switzer came in, and they had years and years. When I was in the 70s, 80s, and so on, every year at Thanksgiving they were top 5 teams playing. So I think the quality of the teams and the level of competition was the key to that rivalry.
When you came in, they gave you a uniform number 1, and then your last 2 years, your uniform number 21. Did you pick or was it assigned to you? I know that was a few years ago.
Yeah. I'm guessing that it was assigned to me, but they didn't have a lot of single-digit numbers back then. I think I had 21 when I was actually a junior and senior, but regardless, it was nice because it was my high school number. Yeah, but I didn't ask for it.
So one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, were you aware of the competition? And this is my question. As a junior, Nebraska beat Georgia 45-6, and they beat them 17-12 in the Orange Bowl. You had Burt Jones and Tommy Casanova, who would both go on to the NFL. When you played, did you look at their other rosters? Did you read their press clippings? Were you aware of people you played?
Yeah, you knew. I mean, I played against John Riggins, against losing his name, Steve Jones from Oklahoma. Steve Owens. I'm sorry, Steve Owens. Those guys. I mean, they were great players, but you didn't go in and kind of look over and see, oh, where is he or something. You know, it was business, and they were on the other team, and you were there to stop them, and you didn't really pay attention to the stars on the other teams.
So that 1970 team that you touched on briefly, 8 future NFL players: Jerry Taggy, Bill Olds, Jerry List from Bay City, John Dutton, Rich Glover, Willie Harper, Jeff Kinney, and Johnny Rodgers, the eventual Heisman Trophy winner. When you played in 70, you had to realize, man, I got a lot of talent. This team's going to go places.
Yeah, well, there's one you left off the list, and this will tell you, and that was another, I guess, going back, it was the depth that we had, because if anybody went down or got hurt, it was next man up. There was a guy, a teammate of mine, he was a year behind me, his name was Monty Johnson, and Monty Johnson went on to become an all-pro middle linebacker for the Oakland Raiders. You know, Monty was a great pro. Monty Johnson never started a game at Nebraska.
Funny how it works out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in 1970, Nebraska 11-0-1. You remember that one blemish?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, it wasn't a yeah, it was a blemish.
It was a tie.
It was a tie. We were playing the second game of the season, Southern Cal. We were playing them out there, and we missed a chip shot field goal in the last couple minutes of the game, or we would have won that game too. But
Now, they only finished 6-4-1 that year, but boy, you want to talk about talent. Mike Ray, Clarence Davis, Sam Cunningham, Rod McNeil, Bob Chandler played for the Raiders, Charlie Weaver played linebacker for the Lions. They had a really good team, but they only finished 6-4-1, and you guys tied 21-21 in that game.
yeah.
You grew up in Saginaw. Ed Perriard grew up in Birch Run. Were you aware of Ed Perriard when you were in high school? Probably, Birch Run's miles away.
Well, I mean, you back in the days when we had a printed newspaper, you know, you could read about other people doing stuff, and I would, you know, pick up the paper on Saturday morning, and to be Eddie Perriard ran for this and this and everything. So I knew of Eddie, but we didn't know each other until he was a counselor with me at a conditioning camp that we had up near West Branch that the Becker family, I think, put together. But you know, Eddie and I, you know, same age, and we were very close, and it's hard to talk about Ed, and I know that the guys on the '73 team all knew Ed and what an incredible guy he was. Not only an athlete, he was like Tarzan. You know, I mean, he was just built like a brick. I mean, he was and he was tough, and he was quick, but he had a heart of gold, and just.
I remember when he went in the Saginaw County Sports Hall of Fame, you got that huge Nebraska letter and had all his teammates sign that to give to them. How cool you did that. That's very cool.
It was nothing at all. All I had to do is I said, sign this for Eddie, and everybody, everybody in Nebraska loves Eddie Perriard.
So your senior year, you won the Big 8 Scholar Athlete Medal. That's a mouthful. You won a medal for your academic prowess. So you go to Duke and get your law degree. Come back to Saginaw and you work for Braun Kendrick and have an outstanding career at Braun Kendrick and retired. Then you went back to work. Saginaw Valley State University, Director of Athletics and Associate Vice President of Legal Affairs. Which one was tougher?
Oh, AD. it's not an easy job. I was talking to George, and I mean, a lot of people, anybody I ever talked to about that job, I didn't really know what I was getting into. We had a need for an AD, and the president came to me and he said, "I'd like you to step in to be AD." And I said, "Well, why is that?" And he said, "Well, you played sports, you must know something about it." But
they were under investigation at the time from the NCAA.
Yeah.
What a time for you to step in.
Yeah, we had some, as I've said, I told Hugh, lots of misdemeanors, but no felonies, and I won't get into my opinion about the NCAA because I don't know if we're on record, but if we put it this way, we were used, I think, as an example, and it was difficult, but all in all, despite the fact that there was a crisis du jour, and I always describe my job as an AD as whack-a-mole, because you were always putting out, Kent Howenstein were talking about, putting out fires, and that was the job.
And you also led an athletic department during the pandemic.
Right, COVID, which, that's almost indescribable, because you've got all these kids. We had over 500 student athletes, and all of them are just champing at the bit to be able to go out and compete. And you got all this stuff going on politically around the country and stuff, and we're trying to enforce restrictions and things like that. It was very difficult. So yeah, my tenure was. Now that I think about it, it wasn't easy, but
so
enjoyable.
Under your directions, you hired 9 head coaches, added a 20th sport, women's lacrosse, upgraded facilities, installed a new video scoreboard at Wick Stadium, installed artificial turf, soccer and lacrosse fields, replaced the artificial turf at Wick Stadium, resurfaced the outdoor tennis courts, replaced the flooring in basketball and volleyball arenas. What did you do on Tuesday? Holy smokes.
Well, it's easy. All that stuff is great, but I can't take the credit for it. I mean, when you do that, it's a team effort, and I had tremendous support from our administration, and I had an incredible deputy athletic director who worked for me, and we were able to get that stuff done.
Now, I saw you the other day, you and I talked at the Saginaw Valley State University Cardinal Athletic Hall of Fame. And one of the questions I told you I was going to ask you, you brought in a team, historically black college, for Saginaw Valley to play. That was important to you. Why?
Well, I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, was that at a young age, high school, I realized that there was a lot of a lack of diversity in our world, for lack of a better expression, and I kind of carried that with me for forever, and so when we got a chance to schedule the game with Bowie State University, which is an HBCU, historically black college university in Maryland, they were coming to our place to play, and I saw their athletic director at the NCAA convention, and I said, "Is Clyde Dowdy?" I went to Clyde. I said, "Hey, Clyde," I said, what if we did a collaboration, and it was more than a football game, and so that led to us getting the heads of our Black Studies programs at Bowie State and Saginaw Valley together, and they put together this program. And then a colleague of mine from Dow Chemical, who went to an HBCU, when I told her about it, I was trying to get some money, and she said, "Well, you got to bring the band." And we brought the band, which was awesome.
And dance team.
Yeah, the Symphony of Soul band from Bowie State.
Very cool.
We did all this programming. We showed a movie. We had panel discussions, everything like that. And I'll just conclude because I know we're running out of time, but like Jimmy Valvano, yeah. But so with apologies to the two Terrys, Terry Urick and Terry Murphy, the Domer brothers, this year, because we thought that what we had done with Bowie State was unique, and it was. It was the first time it's ever been done like that. A lot of teams play HBCUs, but Notre Dame actually played Tennessee State, and they did the same thing we did. So I always say, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, and I have to thank Notre Dame for taking our idea and running with it.
Final question. You look back on your career. If you had to do something over again, is there anything that you can think of that you would do different?
I'd make that the front end of that one-on-one against Flint Central.
Nice hand for John Decker. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
All right, John's going to hand that microphone off to Mr. Craig Dill. How's that? All right.
It's back, it's fine.
How you doing, buddy? I've been dying for a crack at Craig Dill for a long time. My first question, you've played a lot of basketball, junior high, high school, college, ABA, rec ball, Gus Macker. How's the body holding up?
I was talking to John about that earlier. On my team at Michigan, and we had some great players. I'm the only guy of the group that's still got all his body parts. And I can't say that was necessarily because of how well I took care of my body over the years, but knock on wood, I'm pretty good physically. My vertical's down to about 1.5 inches, but other than that.
How does somebody 6'11" drive a car comfortably?
Well, there's not a lot of cars you can do that with, so you got to be careful. I've always driven Suburbans. Now I'm kind of a pickup guy, and I didn't have to do what, back in the day they used to claim that Wilt Chamberlain would prefer to be in a little sports car, but he completely mounted the seat in the back seat so that he could hit the. But yeah, I've managed it over the years.
How about
it's not
flying?
that hard.
Flying's got to be real difficult when you fly.
It wasn't when we played. When I think back on it, we never professionally or in college we chartered a DC-3 to all the Big Ten games, but when we flew commercial, it just didn't seem as bad. But they shrunk those damn planes, and all of you that don't have the leg issue, I'm sure you've all noticed it, but it's gotten to the point now you prefer to fly first class if you can afford it, but that's kind of what it is.
So that picture that I alluded to over here probably brought back some really good memories.
It definitely did. That was 1962, and we had an amazing rivalry back then. Arthur Hill Saginaw High in basketball was Saginaw was the capital of high school basketball for those 2 years, 62 and 63. And I had the good fortune to have a great high school coach, Chuck Fowler, who had confidence in me as a sophomore when I showed up at 6'9", 190 pounds, and was patient with me and developed, till I got to the point in my junior year where we could play these guys pretty well, even up. They beat us both all 3 times we played them that year, but they had Ernie Thompson, who was obviously the best high school player I ever played against. And but they had other guys on that team, Lovell Humes,
Bob Spear. Yep.
who was Bob Spear, and Brian Best, and yeah, those were amazing days. They're distant memories, but I can still remember.
So you played 3 years at Arthur Hill, and your senior year, named All-State and All-American, averaged 28.5 points a game. I'm guessing you'd trade all that in for another shot at Adrian.
Yeah, probably. There's the good news is there's not that many folks out there anymore that can remember that game.
Yep.
When I first came back to Saginaw after law school, that was my the common question. But that was a funny game. We were undefeated going into the semis, and didn't think we were looking past them, but we did. And it's just one of those things. The other team we expected to play in the finals was Detroit Northwestern, and they had two great players on their team, one of which became a teammate of mine at Michigan, Jim Pitts, and they had another guy that ended up in Iowa. But we both lost the semis. And so the state championship game that year ended up being Adrian and Ferndale, and it was like, okay.
Yep, Ferndale beat them.
Ferndale beat them.
Yep. Was there somebody that you tried to emulate when you were growing up? Did you have a favorite player?
I heard you ask that of John. I think probably because being a big guy inside, there's a lot of things you have to, you're protecting the hole back in those days, and you're trying to get your feet right and your coordination or whatever. I think Bob Pettit, who was a great player with the St. Louis Hawks, was about my size, 6'8", 6'9", and was also a shooter from outside because I didn't just rely on, hanging around the hole. But, yeah, growing up as a kid, probably he was a guy that I looked up to.
So you mentioned Chuck Fowler. He was a coach well ahead of his time, don't you agree?
Absolutely. And, I had a coach who had great success at Michigan. I had a coach who won the first ABA championship, but Chuck Fowler was the most important coach to me in my development in my career. And his time ended too soon. I'm still hoping he gets the credit, maybe gets into this Sports Hall of Fame, but he's a guy, I don't know, other than knowing who he was, if you realize what a great player he was in college. He played on a team at Illinois that was called the Whiz Kids. And before World War II broke out, they, I believe, won the national championship on his sophomore year. And then he went and was in the military. When he came out, he went to he went to the same school Larry Lading went to, Illinois Southern or someplace. And, but Chuck, although he wasn't, as a player, he wasn't a big guy, he worked with me tirelessly. He told me before, after my 9th grade year, he said, we had another kid in my class that was about 6'7". He said, one of you guys is going to be playing next year. It's up to you. It's who doing it. So I spent my entire summer, 4 or 5 hours a day at the Y, and the other guy spent his summers up at Old Mission at his cottage, and that's kind of how that one played out. But Fowler, I mean, the incentive, and he was a great game coach. He was, he wasn't just a guy that worked in practice. He could handle himself. At Michigan, we didn't have the world's greatest game coach, but we had some great talent, and sometimes talent can be more important than coaching.
So you were recruited by about 30 schools. Why did you pick Michigan?
Well, it was interesting because my dad was a Michigan State alum, and I had been a Michigan State fan my entire life growing up. And Forty Anderson was the head coach at Michigan State at that time. He started recruiting me in my sophomore year at Arthur Hill, showing up and talking at assemblies and whatever. But when it got down to actual recruiting time, I think the most important decision for me was who you were going to play with. And we had a group at Michigan. They were all like brothers, and they still are.
I know you have reunions.
The ones that are left, we've traditionally gotten together every 4 or 5 years now. In the later times, if they're able, every couple of years, because nobody knows who's going to be there the next. But these are guys that we went to their weddings, knew their kids, and when it really came down at the end, I turned down some chances to go out of state to Kentucky and Duke and some places, but I chose Michigan over Michigan State mainly by the teammates I met during the recruiting process. And I knew that it was going to be a tougher way to break in there because we had an All-American center ahead of me who was going to be a senior my sophomore year, Bill Button. But I learned a lot from Bill in practice, and the experiences we had with the successes we had, I would have never had, certainly in East Lansing and any of the other schools I was recruited by.
So you never played at Chrysler. You played at the Fielding H. Yost Fieldhouse. What was that like?
Well, I don't know. There's been some interesting books written about that place. That's now the hockey arena in Ann Arbor. But it was the indoor track. We seated about 9,000 people. And, of course, in those days, there was standing room only of probably another couple thousand that would come in. They claim they used to shoot pigeons up in their rafters. They got in the building. And the locker room, my youngest son played at Michigan and with Tommy Amaker, and I saw what those locker rooms were like. The locker rooms in Yost, we shared with the football team, and they were the locker like this. That was your, and we had one training room for both teams. I mean, it was a different kind of deal back then. Yost, though, the value of Yost was that being that close with 9,000 people, it was a great atmosphere to play in.
So you get to Michigan, and man, the Cassie Russell, Oliver Darden, Bill Bunton, there were some tremendous athletes
There already, and Larry Tregoning, the captain that my sophomore year, was a great player, and you couldn't help but Kaz was a one of a kind, the best college player I ever saw or played with or against. And that sophomore year, we were ranked number one most of the year, and he won 3 or 4 games himself with shots in the last second, half court at Coble Hall. But Bill Bunton, great player, great college player, but had some health issues that then Oliver and I played professionally together.
So you had some battles with Duke.
Yeah, we did.
What about those Duke fans? I know you were telling me before, just because John Decker went to Duke. Tell us the truth.
My first road game as
they were
on the varsity was Duke. And so we charter a plane, we get down there, and we don't spend the night. We're going to fly back. And Duke, the previous year, had been in the Final Four, as had Michigan. And so we knew it was going to be a pretty good game. And got out on the floor. The place is smaller than Yost Fieldhouse. It still is. Cameron Arena is still the joke it was back in the 60s. And all the great players they've had and all whatever, they still play in that same place. But the stuff that was coming out of the stands towards the players was unbelievable. And I came from Saginaw at Arthur Hill, which at that time was basically, it wasn't segregated, but there weren't any, we had no black players, but Ernie Thompson and I had been playing against each other since the 6th grade. And I couldn't, it was a different time. That was 1964. And what was going on in the world, sometimes you live a bit of a sheltered life here back in Saginaw, but it was crazy down there, and it was serious. They were, at that point, for those of you who are too young to remember, there were no black players in the major colleges south of the so-called Mason-Dixon line, Kentucky, Duke, whatever. And I give our guys credit. I mean, the stuff that was coming out, I was ashamed to hear what was being said. But we kicked their butts down there that night, and it was a nice plane trip back home. And but they had great players. They had a great coach, Vic Bubas, who had recruited me. But the fans were something different.
Nasty.
Not the players,
Yep.
the fans.
Yep. That 64-65 team that you played on, they averaged 92.9 points. Did anybody play any defense back then?
Hey, listen, that's what we averaged, not what the
Yes.
other guys averaged.
You outscored your opponents by an average of 12 points a game.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive.
Well, they were, yeah. And I guess, maybe our defense, we had what we were famous for, they called the bloody nose lane. And if you try to come in down the hole, we had Bill Button, Oliver Darden, and other guys, that it was a pretty rough treatment. But of course, we had Cassie Russell, who, you look at these guys who hold the scoring records now, they played 4 years.
Yep.
Cassie Russell played 3 years, as everybody did at that time. And he averaged 30 points a game for 3 years. And so, in my opinion, regardless of what anybody's done since him, nobody's duplicated what he's done. But we played defense.
Dick Pope told me one time, he said, everybody ranting and rave about Michael Jordan taking off from the free throw line and dunking. He says, Cassie was doing it at Michigan back in the 60s.
No. Cassie, I mean, our favorite play in those days was him stealing the ball up at about half court, going down for a dunk, but he was not leaving at the free throw line to dunk it as Michael did. But Cassie was an outside guy. I mean, he had range at 30, 32 feet was not an issue. That game at Coble Hall, he had one step over the half court line. He made the winning basket on a legitimate jump shot, not just some hope.
So that Michigan team was the very first Michigan team ever to knock off a #1 basketball team, was Wichita.
Yeah. Crazy game.
And you beat them by 2 points.
And it was Wichita ended up in the Final Four, but they had 3 guys that graduated in December. Crazy deal in those days. Some kids, whenever they started school, they had Nate Bowman, who played in the NBA forever, and that was probably the best college game I ever played in. Both teams shot close to 60%. It wasn't a super high scoring game, but then Kaz, that's the game. No time left. He makes one from half court to win the game, Coble. And then by the time they got to the Final Four, UCLA got lucky. They got to play them in the finals. We played Bill Bradley.
Yep. I was going to ask you about Bill.
And that was a real grudge game for us because we had beaten them earlier in the year in New York. And, everybody thought Bill Bradley was better than Cassie and whatever. And so we smoked them in the semis. But it took some effort. And UCLA had a real easy game with Wichita. And then we just ran out of gas in the finals. We would have beaten UCLA, I believe, 4 out of 5 if we'd have played them more. But not that night.
That year, Oliver Darden made, set a Michigan record, made 11 of 11 free throws. The next year, you beat his record, 12 for 12.
I was amazingly, one of my greatest high school memories is as a sophomore, we played Flint Northern at Arthur Hill. And we were down 1 point, and there was like 2 seconds on the clock. And so Fowler goes, okay, try to get the ball inside to Dill, close to the basket. So we get on the floor. The defensive guy is standing on my foot, so I can't move, and what are you going to do? So I ran out above the free throw line. They throw me the ball. I had no chance of making it, and the guy fouls me. I made 2 free throws with no time left, and we won by 1 point. But, that was just kind of a crazy deal. But some big guys have had historically trouble with free throws
Wilt?
That was, Wilt. But I shot about 76, 77% free throws.
So 64-65, Michigan's ranked first in the country.
Yeah.
Ended up playing UCLA.
Yeah.
And in that game, 3 guys fouled out. If it set a NCAA record, 3 guys fouled out on your team.
We were, as I said, we were tired, I think, more than we thought from that game. Gail Goodrich played for UCLA.
Keith Erickson.
He had, but Goodrich had scored more than 20 points in a game all season. He scored 42 that night against us. It lit us up. And that's what was happening. We were chasing smaller guys, and Bill got in foul trouble, fouled out, and, I'll take your word for the other 2. But again, they were not the better team, but they were the better team that night. They were definitely the better team that night.
Question I wanted to ask you, when you guys played Princeton,
Right.
we talked about Bill Bradley,
Right.
6'5", ended
Right.
up playing for the Knicks. There was a guy sitting on the end of the Princeton bench, Larry Lucchino. Who
Didn't
ended
know.
up being
No.
a Major League Baseball executive, sat on the other end of the bench, averaged .05 points a game for them. He was sitting on their bench, and he ended up president of the Red Sox. One brought Theo Epstein in. I mean, just a true baseball guy.
Well, they had a coach that turned out to be a pretty good coach, Butch Van Bredikoff,
Yep.
who ended up in the NBA. And Bradley, he fouled out in our first game in New York, and so that was the spin they were going to beat us. So in the semifinals, we held them to 19. The next night, in those days, you played a second game if you lost the first game. You played a
Consolation game. Yep.
He scored 56 the second night against the depleted Wichita State. And Bill Bradley turned out to be a pretty good player. And,
So your senior year, averaged 19.6 points, named second team All Big Ten, but you were co-captain, which is very cool because your son ended up being. That's got to make you awfully proud.
But yeah, it is, and it's turned out there's only 2 father and son combos that were captains at Michigan basketball: Dan Fife and his son, and then Colin and I. And he was my youngest, and he went through a lot to get even the opportunity to play at Michigan after the injury he suffered his senior year. But that was one of my proudest moments, certainly, is being on the floor with him on his senior night.
So you're drafted by the NBA by the San Diego Rockets.
Right.
But did you even consider them?
Didn't even visit, and they were really unorganized, and they had a coach that had a name, but other than getting a letter and saying see you here at rookie camp, and then we'll talk money. Indiana Pacers was the team I was drafted by initially in the ABA, and that was the smartest move anybody ever made, was making a professional team in Indiana. I mean, that state still is crazy basketball. And they were all up front, organized, negotiated in good faith, and I made the decision early on. That's where I was going to try and do it.
Yep. You ended up in the ABA with Pittsburgh, won a championship in the ABA, played with Connie Hawkins. Look at
I said Cassie Russell was the best college player I played. The best player I ever played with ever is Connie Hawkins. He's in the NBA Hall of Fame. He got involved in a mess in college where he was not part of a scandal, but was.
I read the book.
Okay.
I read the book.
So anyways, he ends up, Don Nelson, who's a pretty famous guy in the NBA, is a senior at Iowa. Connie's a freshman. And in the freshman varsity game, Connie scores 26 points and holds Nelson to 10. And then he was declared ineligible. So he ends up playing with Globetrotters for 3 or 4 years. And then the ABA gave him a chance. He ultimately had a big lawsuit with the NBA, played with the Phoenix Suns. But he was Dr. J before Dr. J. I mean, all these guys, Cassie, had hands that were like a whole knuckle longer than mine. I thought I had decent-sized hands, but not like these guys. And Hawkins was that guy that could do this windmill thing where he would take off up at the top of the free throw line and unstoppable.
So you won the ABA championship. They moved the franchise to Minnesota. You said, nope, I'm going to go back and say I want to start a family. Probably the best decision you ever made.
without question. Well, the first thing is I had to get married, and that was
Had to?
well, no.
Okay.
I mean, that was in 1968 after the season was over, and then our coach, who was such a great guy, he almost had a nervous breakdown with some of the characters we had on our team. He quit, and so there was a new coach picked. I didn't know anything about him, but it turned out that was probably the smartest thing I ever did, because he got in a fist fight in Minnesota with the owner, the coach with the owner. And that was the end of his career. And then Connie Hawkins blew out his knee in a game that year, and so they went nowhere. And my goal ultimately was to go to law school. They weren't making the big bucks in the ABA, and the starting minimum salary in the NBA and the ABA was $12,500. Kind of a joke compared to today, but if you remember, Al Kaline was only making $100,000 back then as the best player the Tigers had. So, the money wasn't there, and I was serious about law school. I did get married and happily went to law school.
When I first met you, you were an attorney, and they used to say, if Craig Dill's coming your way, go the opposite way because he's going to have divorce papers.
Well, I didn't represent your wife.
No. Damn Brisboes. So, final question. If you could do it all over again, is there something you do different?
As far as playing goes, no. And I was extremely happy with the success I had in my legal career, and I was extremely happy being able to follow my boys. I didn't win a state championship at Arthur Hill. My oldest son won 2 at Novell, and my youngest, who ended up at Michigan, won 1 playing with Shane Battier at Country Day. So those were proud moments. No, if I had to do over again, I was very fortunate. I was very fortunate to have such a great coach in high school, and I was fortunate to always be on winning teams. There are a lot of guys I know that ended up, they were great players, big scorers, but they were never on teams that. We won 3 consecutive Big Ten titles at Michigan, and that was only done by one other team, and that was Jerry Lucas in Ohio State. So, anyway.
I appreciate you taking the time.
Hey, no problem. Thanks,
All right.
Probably need to get me on a hook.
So next up would be Mr. George Eiler. Yeah. No, I think we're good. So one thing I should mention, we brought this helmet to the last reunion the 73 team had, and everybody signed it. If you did not sign it, I've got a Sharpie up here. Oh boy, look at the front. Dijak, Greg Branch, right on the front. So if you miss signing this, this will be up here. How you doing?
Hey, buddy. I'm doing.
The pride of Marinette, Wisconsin. Earned 8 varsity letters, 3 in track, 3 in football, 2 in basketball, and 1 in tennis. Where in the hell did that come from?
I wanted a letter from my jacket. And I played tennis the first year and, competed. And our football coach came up to me at the end of the tennis season. He said, my quarterbacks run track. He didn't have to answer or say anymore. Track from there on.
Yep. So as a senior, you led that high school to an undefeated record. You're 7-0, you only played 7 games. Became the first ever athlete from that school to be named all-conference in 2 different sports, football and basketball. Tell us a little bit about that one-horse town, Marinette.
Well, it's a one-horse town, all right. It's about 12,000 people. And, people back in the 50s and the 60s lived and died sports. I mean, we really did. I mean, everybody was a Packer fan up that way, and you just were so into it. The high school games, we played to 4,000 or 5,000 regularly in football and basketball. If you didn't get to a game during the junior varsity game, you weren't getting a seat. And we had a very competitive, a great senior class, much like our, group here. But we were competitive. And one we screwed up though. God dang! We were ranked #1 in the state in basketball, and game got away from us, and one of our better players got hurt and couldn't play in the tournament. And, it cost us. It cost us everything.
So you ended up at Western Michigan University, played 3 years, kind of Swiss Army knife. They had you listed as a quarterback, a running back, defensive back. 1 year at 63, you rushed the ball 5 times for a 13.2 average and caught 6 passes for a 27.5 average just in one season. And then in 62, I mentioned those 3 interceptions. They went back and dug and dug and dug, and they found a guy from the 40s that had 4. So you didn't have.
Yeah. There was somebody still ahead of me.
So you played for a gentleman by the name of Merle Schlosser.
Correct.
Tell me about him.
Merle was a great coach. He really did a wonderful job, but he ran the veer option. And I've never seen something where you don't block everybody. And we would double down and things like that and not block the defensive end or the defensive tackle. And, I was a quarterback. I'm not too fond of this, not blocking people. I really liked it. I liked Merle a lot, but, that's kind of how everything went. And then Bill Doolittle came.
Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
Yep, nope.
Well, Bill Doolittle, who had, he played or coached at Flint Central, I believe. And Bill Doolittle was there my senior year. And Billy Doo was like the Energizer Bunny, running around. But he had been on Army staff with, I think, Red Blake or somebody over there. And then he brought a very different type of offense in. Now, you got to kind of look back at those days. We had single substitution rule.
Right.
Meaning that whoever played offense played defense. And, I was the person who went in for the quarterback. Well, every once in a while we'd have more people out there that they had a substitute, so I'd have to take a couple snaps. But, it was just a different game in those days. You played the game with, 12, 15 guys.
At Western, you won the Mike Gary Award for sportsmanship your senior year. The very first recipient of that award. I think people on this side of the state don't know about Mike Gary. He coached for an incredibly long time over at Western. You won that award. Very first winner.
Mike Gary played at the University of Minnesota, coached at Western for a long time, and then was promoted to athletic director. And he was a big fella, so he was an intimidating figure to run into. And when he called you in to talk to you, I mean, you walked the walk when you went into Mike's office. We never had him for a coach, so he was already in the administration angle.
Now, they raised just boatloads of money for a scholarship named in his name to go to athletes Western Michigan. Just 6 figures they raise every year. 1965, you played for a semi-pro team in Grand Rapids, the Grand Rapids Blazers. They were 8-1-1, wide receiver and punter. Any recollection of that time?
Yeah, we had it was interesting, to say the least. Practice twice a week. Everybody had a different job. You couldn't support yourself on what they were paying you. And we had a guy named John Lamakowski who had been with the Lions, and Ed Jewett, who had been with the Bears as the receiver. We had some real good personnel on that ball club, but that was a little different atmosphere. They'd get the checks every other Thursday and right down to the tavern and belly up. And it was It was different, but it was really a lot of fun. We played in Joliet, Illinois. We went down to Des Moines, and we played in, I can't even remember, in Ohio. And we had some very good athletes. So we had a kid named Junior Edge, who was our quarterback, who Lombardi had drafted in, I think, the third round the year before, and sent him over to play with us for a year. But it was an experience.
So from there you got into coaching. Your first stop was Owasso. And you coached, and you and I had talked about this before. I asked you, all the people you ever coached, who was the best in, didn't have to think Brad Van Pelt. Is there anything he could not, played 3 sports at Michigan State, and then ended up being an all-pro linebacker for the Giants. Is there anything he could not do?
Not athletically. He was the finest athlete I've ever been associated with. He carried our football team, our basketball team at Owasso, and then he played baseball in the spring. But he went over to Michigan State, and you couldn't letter as a freshman.
Right.
So he letters on the football team. He starts at they were playing cover 2, and they had him at one of the safeties, and they had Brad back there, and then he goes on the basketball team. How the heck did that go? Well, he was a backup. He wasn't a front runner. But then on the baseball trip, they went to Florida. First pitch of his career, Brad strokes one out of the ballpark. And he was just special. He was all-pro, 7 times, All-American. He won the Maxwell Cup Award as the outstanding defensive player in the country. And he was pretty special athlete.
In Tuck Bedford, man, you should see him hit a softball. Holy cow.
Well, I remember the king in his court, Eddie Feiner, came into Owasso, and Eddie, he's on the mound, he's thrown behind his back, and then he goes to second base, and he pitches from second base, and, Brad's first time up, and Eddie Feiner's on the mound, and Brad's 18 years old, home run. Next time Brad's up, home run. Third time Brad's up, home run. Eddie Feiner offered him a job right there on the spot. But Brad, I can't remember the fellow's name from Indiana. I worked on the radio for a little while over there, and I did basketball games and got to do a game in Jennison Fieldhouse. And what the heck was that guy's name? He was George McGinnis. George McGinnis is with Indiana and Michigan State, and there's a scrum and then a fast break out, and you look and there's 8 guys at the other end of the court. Brad's at half court, and McGinnis is laying on the free throw line at the other end. Well, they were smart enough to get Brad out of the game, but not until the refs could call 2 fouls in about 30 seconds on him. But he was special. And then, in the NFL, he just he scrambled. He was with the Giants for 8-9 years, and then he went over to the Oakland Raiders. And when you have a 17-year career in the NFL, you're a lot of athlete.
You sure are. So you go from Owasso to Saginaw. What made you even apply for that job? And did you interview with Larry Lading?
I interviewed with Larry and Don and Jack Taylor, and there was a guy named Jack Anderson, Arthur Hill grad, back in 60, 61, somewhere in there, and he was a teammate of mine at Western. And when the guys get together, I'd talk about Marinette and High School, and Jack kept talking about this Arthur Hill. I thought, what the hell is Arthur Hill? And then one day I was taking a ride, and I came over here and kind of got lost on that Genesee and all that area, and bingo, I'm right in the front door of Arthur Hill, and I said, oh my God, this is that place Jack was always talking about. And, he had talked about the football field, so I drove around the back, and, on my way home, I'm thinking, if that job ever opens, I'm going after it. I like just everything about it, and I like the town, and I like I like the idea of playing in the Saginaw Valley. I had taken one of our ball clubs over in Owasso, and we scrimmaged Elmer Ingles' team over in East Lansing, and we held our own, to say the least. And I thought, you know what, we can play in that Saginaw Valley League, and one of the best moves I ever made.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the 73 team, but the 72 team had one loss, and that was to Bay City Central, eventual state champ. What made those Bay City Central teams so good?
Elmer Engel.
Duh.
Elmer Engel was as good a high school coach as I ever ran into. I mean, he just, you know, he had everything you needed. You know, he had a great school in terms of numbers. You get 4,000 kids in that school. That's 2,000 boys.
Yep.
You got a lot to pick from every year. And Elmer just, he coached rough, tough football. And his kids played that way. But let me back this up one year. That first year when we came in, Tommy Carrick and Bill Johnson and Eddie Perriard and Dan McShannock and all the fellas, that first year, those kids had only won one game in the previous 3 years. And, you know, it was like we were trying to put some confidence into these kids. And when we played, our opening game was Bay City Central. And, you know, first quarter, 0-0. Second quarter, 6-6. Jimmy Jones got everything going at Arthur Hill. Jimmy Jones ran a punt back 68 yards, and we're tied 6-6. So end of the third quarter, we're still tied, and people are starting to look, holy Christ, they're tying the defending state champs. And, you know, we're getting a little excited about everything. We hung on and tied that game, and you'd have thought we won the Super Bowl. I mean, it was really a big thing, and people like Jimmy and Grzinia and those kids, they set the tone for what was to come.
Everybody, you know, they look at Jim Jones and they think he was part of the 73 team because of his connotation with Ron, but actually the year before. So.
But 72, we had a heck of a team. If they'd had a better coach that first game, we might have beat Bay City Central. But we lost that game, and it was an eye-opener because, you know, our 73 group were 72 juniors, and they had never lost anything.
Right.
The kids at South had never been beat. The kids at our
North.
JVs had never been beat, and it was an eye-opener. But we had some big games, but I'll tell you that Flint Northern game that year, Arthur Hill hadn't beaten Flint Northern, and I believe it was 15 years or something like that. And they had a defensive end, and his name gets away from me right now, but he played for Saginaw Valley, and he played in the NFL.
Eugene Marv.
Eugene Marv, and we ran a off-tackle play. I mean, we had to make a statement, and it wasn't going to be a behind-the-back pass or anything. It was just, let's get in this, get it on. And, you know, we ran off tackle. Terry Yerkes is as good a running back in high school as you'll ever see. And Mark Thompson, we used him as a kickout block. And we would double down on the tackle, and Mark would kick out, or we'd base block it. And we had a couple different schemes. But I'll tell you, by the middle of the third quarter, Eugene Marv didn't want anything to do with Mark Thompson. Mark Thompson is as tough as it gets. And, you know, that was a statement game. It really was. Now, we really beat a good football team. And it got things going. Nobody touched us after that. I mean, there was nobody even close.
Now, that 73 team, I've got my theory that those tackles, offensive tackles, Walter, Zach, and Dijak, were just, those guys were college tackles. And then you had so much talent and depth, guys didn't have to go two ways. That was my theory on why that team was. Am I correct?
Well, we had a lot of talent.
Yeah.
There's the bottom line.
Yep.
We had, you know, Doug and Paul at the tackles, and you get a couple of 250-pound tackles in the early 70s.
Yes.
Those are big people. And, you know, and we had Murph at the pivot, and we had Rodney and Bobby Sir at the guards, and Jonesy and Jay playing at one of the tight ends. And, You know, one of the sad things that happened that year was Jay getting hurt.
That was one of my questions.
Okay, I'll
That-
back
that-
off.
That was one of my questions. I know you have an affinity with a lot of your players. What were your thoughts when Jay got hurt? What was going through your head?
I felt for Jay, number one. But, you know, he was such a big part of our team. I mean, he was a big part of lifting weights. And, you know, this is really, the lifting weights was in the crib yet. And Jay was strong. He was just such a part of everything we did. And it kind of broke my heart for him. I remember going over to his house after the game that night. And, you know, here's a starting linebacker, a starting tight end, and, you know, he's out for the year. And, you know, his college scholarship possibly going out with it. But well, go ahead.
I have a sneaking hunch you didn't have any problem with parents.
Most of the time. not all the time. I had one parent, and I'm going to slip this in here. Brian Ferguson, where's Bri? Brian's dad, Jimmy Ferguson Sr. Jimmy, he worked for Johnny Green in town, construction, and Jim was a tough guy. And he came up to me just before the start of our 73 season. He says, Coach, we're going to have a good team, aren't we? I said, you bet. Nobody's going to beat us. He said, well, I hope not. I said, what do you mean? He said, I made a little bet with the boys in Flint. I couldn't take any more of their lipping. And he says to me, he said, I got $100 a game. You know, back in the early 70s, that's a pretty good jump. And I said, Ferg, you got nothing to worry about as I'm concerned. And Ferg says, well, I got a little more to tell you. He said, I had to give some points. I said, all right, Ferg, how many did you give? I gave 40. I said, you're kidding me, 40 a game and you got 100 on it? And I said, well, we'll see. But Ferg ended up making 300 before the year was over. But, you know, that's another one of the parents that, you know, you just deal with, and I loved them.
You know, you and I were talking one time, when you coached at Freeland, there was a three-sport athlete there by the name of Chris Holly. And you were brutally honest with me. You said, Chris Holly is the only, we were talking about the talent on that 73 team. Chris Holly is the only one who could have played on the 73 team. That's a tremendous statement.
I didn't say start.
You're correct. You are correct.
Get it straight. You know, Chris was a heck of an athlete,
Yes.
but don't compare people to that 73 team. That's pretty special to me.
So how do four coaches, you only had four coaches corral 54 players? It's like herding cats?
No, we, you know, we had great coaches. I think we had one of the best coaches. Tommy Carrick is as good a line coach as you'll ever see in Michigan high school football, in my opinion. And, you know, and Billy Johns, you know, Bill was the first guy I hired. And I said, Bill, I want you to organize those JVs and be tough with them, you know, and let's just set a tone. And then we had Danny McShannock, who had played at Muskegon, started at Western, and he worked with our linebackers and ends. And then, and we've already talked, I tell you, Ed Perriard, one of the greatest of all time, boy, in my book. And
Tell me about the leadership qualities of Terry Yerrick, Terry Murphy, and Ron Rummel.
that was a big part of why we were so successful. Was, you know, there was, you take Ick. Have you ever seen Ick want something to say I? You won't see it. It doesn't happen. Murph, same thing. Ronnie, how skilled he really was. People don't know how good Ronnie Rummel was because we ran that tight T formation and never really let him explode what he could do best.
Until he went to CMU and then had an
Wait
outstanding
a minute.
career.
Let me finish
Oh,
that.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Roy Kramer comes up to me one time and he says, George, God, you got to let your quarterbacks go a little bit. I said, yeah, probably, but I like winning games too. And I went up to watch Central play after that, and they ran the option. I went up to Roy. I said, Roy, you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. You're telling me to throw the ball, and you're running the option. And it was, we had a lot of fun with it, though.
So Terry ended up with 984 yards. You couldn't get him one more carry to get him over 1,000.
You know, in my calculator, I had him at. I'll tell you, we tried so hard not to individualize anybody on that team. We really did. You know, and the interesting thing, we'd go to put kids in the game, and they'd come up, no, coach, I don't want to go in on the defense. I don't want to be responsible for something like that happening.
Yep.
But, you know, we got Terry Urick at running back. We got Mark Thompson at the other one. We got Kurt Tone, who's here tonight, at fullback. And we had Jimmy Rolfe. He could have started on any team.
Yep.
And Jimmy Bonnell and Timmy Jank played our backup fullback. They would have probably been starters on all of the other teams I had at Arthur Hill.
Let me talk about Mark Thompson for a second. Just 2 weeks ago, he got a prestigious award from the Saginaw County Chamber of Commerce. I don't think you know about it. You got the Dr. Sam Shaheen, I got it written down here, Free Enterprise, Vision of Free Enterprise Award. Huge, huge award. Tell me about Mark Thompson.
He's the toughest guy you're going to ever see. I tell you, he's. If we hadn't had Terry, Mark would have probably had the 900 yards. But I got to kid Mark a little bit right now. Where are you, Mark?
He's right back in the
Remember, we go to Midland. We got a hell of a team. First play of the game, we went off left tackle. Mark goes 70 yards. And some oversized lineman caught him at the 10 before he got it in. And, you know, we scored the next play. Ick scored. So the first minute of the game, we're up 7. But Mark Thompson, that whole Thompson family, they're special people. His mom just passed away, and I remember Ed Thompson coming at the Saginaw High game after the game, and he came and squeezed me, and I mean, I thought he broke my ribs. And that Mark Thompson's as fine a young man as you're going to see anywhere. Oh, he's not so young anymore.
So back then, the Detroit paper, Detroit Free Press, Detroit News, Detroit Times, Associated Press, UPI, didn't show Saginaw a lot of love. You put Saginaw on the map with that 73 team.
Yeah, we did. We did a little bit of politicking, too, before the season started. You know, I was talking with Tom and Bill and all the guys, and I said, wouldn't this be a bitch? We go 9-0, and somebody else, and there's 5 9-0s, and they give the state championship to somebody else. And so we went out and politicked a little bit. And every time we went anywhere, we did a lot of talking about, you know, our program and everything. But we kind of set that thing up as best we could, and then we hoped all those voters kind of remembered what we had been saying.
Joel Trupner, you can't shake him like a bad cold. He played for you at Arthur Hill. He played for you at Saginaw Valley. He coached with you about 12 years. Tell me about Joel.
Joel's a fine man. I'll tell you, he was a tough Arthur Hill football player. Not an extremely quick tackle, but a tackle. And but Joel, you know, he really helped me at Saginaw Valley too with the coaching. He was one of our line coaches and did a fantastic job. Joel's a good man in my book, I'll tell you.
I know he keeps in touch with you all.
Yes, he does.
I see him
he
a
calls
lot.
me regularly, and whenever anything happens with Saginaw, what's that? We're going there, Alex. Here we go. Well, tell the monitor here to ask me something about the defense.
So you had players get into coaching besides Joel, Paul Walderzak, Jim Jones, Brett Forster. That's got to make you feel very special. Your
It
players.
really does. I know when Paul, I went to his first high school football game, and I saw his last one.
At Standish Sterling?
Yeah, they were up in Menominee. It was a coincidence, but, you know, I'd go over there and watch them practice, and I watched Brett Forster's teams practice and followed his career and followed quite a few of the careers of all the fellas. But let's go a little bit on our defense here, buddy.
All right. How deep did you go on defense as far as number of players? I know you had a couple injuries.
We had a couple. Jay got hurt. We lose the linebacker. Tim Jank got hurt at nose. Here's a cute little story on that. Tommy Thompson, the Thompson family.
Yep.
Jank gets hurt, breaks his arm. The refs come over to me, Coach, you got a kid with a broken arm out there. And I said, no way. And Doc Averill and I went out, and Doc's screwing around with it. And he said, yeah, it's broke. So we had taken a little too much time with everything, and we didn't get the sub in the game right away. And so it's all of a sudden, well, Tommy, go out there and play nose guard. And just go right or left. Listen to our call. And Tommy Thompson, he goes out, and we're talking, who we could really put in there. Tackle by Thompson, I hear on the PA. And then I said, well, let's give him one more play. And tackle by Thompson. I said, we got a new nose guard. Now we got to get somebody to help Alex. But when I say Alex, Johnny Krogman, Alex Karras was his idol. He wore number 71. Alex wore 71. And so we nicknamed Johnny Krogman Alex, and they had a lot of fun with it. But, our defense, you got to give those kids credit. We weren't very big.
A lot of pressure on them.
Oh, not in the beginning. But after about the fourth game, as I had mentioned earlier, people did not want to go in the game, especially, we had a great secondary. That secondary was the best I ever had in high school, that I've ever seen in high school, with Mott, Champagne, Rolfe, and Bonnell. Boy, those kids were just so good. And then our linebackers, Nellie McMath and
Guy Pelkey.
Guy Pelkey. Oh, I'll tell you. Take it easy, George. Yeah. I tell you, if there was a tough guy, Guy Pelkey was.
And he
there.
wasn't that big.
No,
he wasn't that big.
Well, none of us are that big. We're that big, but and then our defensive line. We had Tommy in the nose, and Alex at one tackle, and we had Timmy Jank at the other, and then Becker and Mike Carl at the other one, and we were quick. But our defense created 37 turnovers. Now, if you only score on half of those, but we scored on almost all of them, and our defense had fun out there. It was just cut them loose. Our defense was so well. Obviously, they didn't give up points.
You mentioned Dick Mott. Dick Mott's a friend of mine. Dick is an outstanding athlete and was the backup quarterback, but never complained about being behind Ron, because he started on the defense and did very well.
I'll tell you, with the exceptions of Kurt Young, and Ronnie, Dick would have quarterbacked all of our teams. I'll tell you, Dick's a little stinker, though. Where are you, Dick? We go over to Saginaw High. We are in a position to set some records and have a hell of a year. And Dick's in at quarterback. And I said, there's 15 seconds to go. And I said, Dick, whatever you do, just take a knee. Let's get out of here. They got too much speed, and we don't want to screw up at this point with 15 seconds to go. Yeah, Coach, I got you. He goes in, sneaks it in. And I thought, what? He's coming off the field. I said, Dick, we miscommunicated a little. He said, no, Coach, 443 sounds so much better than 437. I got you, Dick. But we ended up having to kind of hold our breath for a little while out there. But it was a great finish.
So you were National Coach of the Year, Michigan High School Football Coach Association Hall of Fame, Saginaw County Sports Hall of Fame, Saginaw Valley State University Athletic Hall of Fame, and Marinette High School Hall of Fame. That is one tremendous career.
I'm very fortunate to have great players, great coaches, and being in the right community all the time. Owasso was a wonderful community. Saginaw, Freeland was a great community to coach football in. And Saginaw Valley had a ball out there.
So you played a lot of sports, a lot of football, coached. If you could do one thing, is there anything you would have changed over the years?
probably win one more game somewhere. But no, I wanted to be a coach from when I was in about 5th or 6th grade, and I just fulfilled. Excuse me?
Favorite Ed Perriard story?
Oh. Oh, Ed and I had a beer or two, and maybe 3, but we went out to that Denny's place on Tittabawassee. I don't know, it was a late night, have some eggs and grease and everything, and we went in, and there were 2 state troopers and 2 kind of loose alley cat kids, and they're hooting on those troopers. I mean, they're after them. And all of a sudden, you know, those 2 guys, they head to the bathroom, and Ed says, hang on, I'm going to go in the bathroom. I thought, oh, baby, here. You could hear wham, bam, things, doors are getting banged open and everything. Ed beat the crap out of both of them. And the state troopers finally, you know, they said, what happened there? And I said, I think those boys ran into a little trouble. He said, we appreciate what you did. Will you 2 just get out of here so we don't know what car you were in? We don't know anything about it. And God dang, I'll tell you, Ed, that was one of the good ones. And on the way up here, we had a snow day. And I used to do that snow dance. And when I saw that daggone thing coming, and about 9 o'clock in the morning, here comes Ed with a snowmobile, parks at my front yard. I said, how the hell did you get here, Ed? He said, well, I came down I-75, took, what is it, 675, and got off on Davenport, and right down the middle of the road with his snowmobile. He was as fancy-free and fun-loving as it gets. Well, I better quit with those.
All right. Could we have a round of applause for Coach George Island? Thank you, Coach.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Pruitt. They always save the youngest for last. Yep. Oh, yeah. If you could have a seat, give Brian Pruitt some courtesy, please. Thank you. Excuse me, can we get started? Gentlemen. Gentlemen, can we get started? Thank you. All right. Somebody asked me the other day, asked me about you. Bad mood. Ever.
Am I ever in a bad mood?
Yep.
Yes, I get in bad moods. That's for sure. That is for sure. Not often. I'm often thankful for what's happened in my life. So I'm not often, but yeah, I get in bad moods.
You didn't have a father in your life, but I know your brother Terry had a big influence on you.
Yeah.
And Terry was an outstanding athlete at Saginaw High.
Yes.
Tell me about your brother.
He has been a father figure in my life, been a great role model to watch, not only as an athlete, as a husband, as a father, but as a community activist as well here in the city of Saginaw. So I have majorly tried to model my life after him. So yeah.
I need to ask you about your father-in-law, Dr. Eugene Seals.
Yeah.
I know you have a special kinship with him.
Uh-huh.
And his son, Gene Fouki.
Yeah.
So Dr. Seals is about 6'5". Gene is 6'6".
Uh-huh.
When you go to Thanksgiving, you got to be the shortest person there.
I get the least amount of food when I go to Thanksgiving. That's the way that works.
So Dr. Seals, and you guys just meshed. You guys
Yeah.
make excellent person in the community.
Yes.
They had a good name in the community. Tell me a little bit about Dr. Seals.
Dr. Seals is one of the most integral. He's as big as he is physically. He has just as big of a heart. He has 7 daughters. I thanked him very much because I married one of those daughters. So he did a great job raising his daughters. My wife and I, we've been married for 28 years. And Dr. Delisha Pruitt, she's the love of my life. She was a Saginaw High Trojan. I was Arthur Hill. They said it could never happen, and we are Saginaw's first Saginaw United. Yes.
Your brother went to Saginaw High. You went to Arthur Hill. Why did you go to Arthur Hill instead of the high?
I was actually supposed to go to Saginaw High. I went to Heaven Ridge Elementary. I was headed to Central Junior High School. Matter of fact, I was doing some sports with Central my final year in elementary. At the turn, right before I lived on the east side, I got in a lot of trouble.
No.
Yeah, I got in trouble. And I made some enemies that weren't so good. My mom picked me up from Heaven Ridge Elementary one day, drove us over the other side of the bridge. I said, "Where are we going?" She said, "We just moved." And she says, because you're going to end up dead. And so we moved over to the west side of Saginaw by Butman Fish Library. And all of a sudden, the school that I was actually playing for a little bit, my 6th grade year in elementary, was Central Middle School. I ended up at North Junior High School.
That's how you got to Arthur Hill.
That's how I got to Arthur Hill. Yeah, by that time I was on a course because I knew about Arthur Hill's football program. I wanted to be a part of that.
So you went to Arthur Hill and you played football, you played basketball and track.
Yes.
In basketball, just one hell of a rebounder, and you were going up against guys a lot bigger than you. Tell me about that.
I had learned at a young age. I played for some great coaches, football, basketball. I actually played for Coach Jim Jones. Jim Jones was my first football coach. And I was starry-eyed about the guy because I knew about his history. I knew where he had come from and what he had accomplished. And matter of fact, I don't even know when I went out for the team if I was interested in football. I wanted to see Jim Jones. And when I got there, to see what he was doing with the young people was impressive. My toughness in basketball came from my elementary school basketball coach, Coach Lawrence McKinley, who was also in the Sports Hall of Fame. Many of the great athletes of my era were coached under him. And what he taught me was that there is more than one way to dominate a game. And however you're going to play that game, you take pride in what you do. And so one of the things that I took pride in, we had scores. One of the things that I wanted to take pride in was rebounding. And so I made that my thing. I made rebounding my thing.
So who recruited you to Central Michigan?
The person who recruited, 2 people. Herb Duramity got in contact with me. Also, Coach Coles, here from Saginaw.
Charlie.
Yep, Charlie Coles visited with me and my mother as well. And they made that connection, and with his influence, that also helped me make a decision towards Central Michigan as well. Yeah.
So your position, tailback,
Yeah.
you had to wait your turn.
Yes, sir.
First 2 years, you played on special teams.
Yes.
What did that teach you?
It taught me patience. It taught me what it took to become what it would actually take to become a college football player, and if nothing else, it taught me how to be a teammate. One of the best things I had going for me in college was this. I played for Coach Jim Urick, Terry Urick's brother, and we all knew about Terry as well. We saw the Sports Illustrated covers. We knew about the 1973 team. Every team that came after you has tried to live up to you, okay? We have all failed at doing so. So my hat off to you all, okay? Impressive. My teammate Matt Rulick is back here as well, too. We came from a program that prepared us for the next level. We did. And I realized that when I got to college, unlike some of my other teammates, I realized how blessed I was because I came from a group of young men and coaches that had prepared us to play at the next level.
This question, I've always wanted to ask you this. I've got a ton of records here that you set at Central Michigan.
Uh-huh.
My question is, you're playing tailback,
Yeah.
and everybody in the stadium knows you're going to get the football. You're looking across line of scrimmage. All 11 players are looking at you. Everybody knows you're going to get the football. What's going through your mind?
End zone. End zone. There's two things that can happen here. If you get to the end zone, that means they didn't get you. Okay, they didn't get you. But what we all know about football is this: even if they know you're coming, it doesn't matter if they know what you're going to run. If everybody does their job is to stop it. But if they can't stop it, like Coach Eiler said, you're just going to keep doing it all day long. And so we had some great players who went on to do some great things. I played with great men at every level. I had a great opportunity to be coached by great men at every level. So it didn't matter if they knew it was coming or not. It was an issue of not if you were going to be disciplined and are you going to do your job.
Tell me, Roy Kramer and Herb Dramedy. Tell me about those two gentlemen.
I can't speak highly of Roy Kramer because I didn't know Roy. I knew of his legacy.
Yes.
Tonight I get the opportunity to meet Coach Eiler. I've heard of Coach Eiler since I was a little boy, so I'm so glad his daughter brought him here tonight, and I got a chance to meet him. Coach Herb Dramedy. I am 50 years of age. I remember at 17, 18 years of age, Herb Dramedy sitting in my living room with my mother and telling my mother that if your son comes to Central Michigan, I will treat him like one of my own sons. I am 50 years old today, and I promise you, my phone will ring, and on the other side of the line, it will be Coach Herb Dramedy, and he will say, I just called to see what you're doing and how you're doing. He is still holding me accountable.
Cool. Very cool. So you finally got your chance to play tailback, and oh my God, the numbers you put up your senior year, 356 yards rushing in one game. Against Toledo.
Yeah.
435 all-purpose yards in one game. Scored 5 touchdowns in the game. Senior year rushed for over 1,800 yards, 22 touchdowns, CMU records, stadium records, MAC records. When you were doing all that, were you aware of just what was going on, or was it a blur?
Honestly, I think it was a blur. I think it was a blur, to be honest with you. I think the older I get, the more it matters to me. I got 4 kids now, and I got a son who does not believe I accomplished any of those things. You guys have experienced this too? Yeah, that wasn't you. You didn't do anything. Look at you. You know, I get a lot of "look at you." You? So it was a blur, but it was an honor. Okay, it was a blur, but I don't want that to be seen as that it was not an honor. It was a great honor, and I think the greatest honor of it all was to be able to be a representation of the program we had at Central Michigan University and the legacy of football that was there. And yes, sir, fire up chips. The joy of it was to as a group of young men, we were able to bring the nation's attention to what was happening at Central Michigan, and that was the great joy of it.
And you got to meet Bob Hope.
Got to meet Bob Hope. Yes, I did. Got to meet Bob Hope. Yeah.
So Ben Roethlisberger, Brian Leftwich, Dan Lefevre, Gary Hogeboom, Curtis Adams, Phil Villapiano, Randy Moss, and Brian Pruitt.
Yeah.
All those have in common MAC Player of the Year.
Yes,
That's
sir.
a mouthful.
Yes.
That's a mouthful. You've got to be tremendously proud of that honor.
Yeah, and I say this again. It was a great representation of what we did as a team. And again, the older I get, the more I think those type of things matter to me, just looking back and being able to say, man, wow, that was a lot of fun.
So people ask me about this all the time. You're done at Central Michigan, and they found that neck injury.
Yeah.
And people ask, man, did he piss and moan? I said, nope. He went the exact opposite direction. He started giving back to the community.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So I'm here in Saginaw for the NFL draft. I'm expected to be drafted in the 2nd round by the Dolphins at the time, which is phenomenal. I started loving football because my mother is a football fanatic. The one thing that always put a smile on her face was Sunday and the Detroit Lions and Billy Sims, okay? And so NFL draft night, me, my family were there. You have childhood dreams. You've done the work in your mind. This is it. I'm going to make it big. Your childhood dream's going to come true. Draft starts, draft ends, names not called. We find out that while I was at the NFL Combine, that they discovered I had some issues with my neck. And I ended up as a free agent with the Atlanta Falcons. They eventually let me go due to the same issue. For the next 2 or 3 years, I keep trying to get into the league, but at that point, I'm a liability. And so I had some decisions to make. I'm young at this time. I'm married. My wife is in medical school. And I'm struggling because my dream just died. And so I had some decisions to make in life. I'm 22 years old. And if I've had the best moment in my life at 22, life is going to suck from this point on. Because I'm going to live to be 120, I promise you, okay? And I made a decision, and that decision was based on something my wife did one day. She comes home from college. She came home from medical school that day, and she walks into our apartment, and she says, "We need to talk." And I knew I was in trouble, okay? So my wife says to me, she says, "You're not the man I married." I said, "What do you mean? I'm sitting right here. What are you talking about?" And she said, "I married a joyful, passionate man. You were an All-American for everybody else. I need you now to be one for me." And how many of you know, as men, that's like the music on the Rocky movie? Dun, 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 dun. That was the day that I got up and I remember my second childhood dream. I had 2 posters on my wall as a kid. Posters of NFL running backs, and my all-time favorite, you would agree, Walter Payton, greatest of all time. I modeled my whole career off of Walter Payton, how he ran violently, okay? And the other poster I had on my wall was a world map. And when I was a little boy, I'd go into my room and I would close my eyes and I would take my finger and I'd let my finger land wherever it landed on that map. I would say, "That's where I'm speaking today." I would get my cassette recorder. I would push the record button. You guys probably remember the 2 record buttons, okay? And then I would pretend to give a speech around the world. So at that moment when my career ended, I asked my wife said, what else did you want to be becoming? And I said, I've always dreamt of speaking. And for my birthday that year, I got letterhead and business cards. And my wife said, "Go dream again."
That's how you got to be a motivational speaker.
Yes.
It's a blessing in disguise. The big guy upstairs had a role for
It
you.
opened a whole new door. I think that it probably even opened up the door on a whole nother level was not what I had accomplished as a player, but that the fact that I could get up after falling so far after what had happened, that I could find life again. And so what that allowed me to do was to just speak and be an inspiration to people and help people make the sudden turns in life, because people don't typically make the sudden turns very well. And when those sudden turns don't happen well, important relationships get broken within our households.
I have one football-related question.
Yes.
You played a lot of fullback, tailback. Did you miss playing defense?
Yeah, well, you know what? Here's the thing.
Dish it out instead of getting it?
See, I learned this from Jim Jones. I learned this from from Coach Urick as well. Well, you got a football in your hand. It doesn't mean you have to get hit, okay? I was taught you got the football in your hand, and if they come, you deliver the blow, okay? And so that's what I was taught. You deliver the blow. And so for me, I think I felt like I was playing both. Sometimes my teammates made fun of my face mask because it was a really big face mask, but I told them that was my defensive mentality.
How do people overcome obstacles to accomplish their objectives?
Yeah. Obstacles are going to be there. At the end of the day, you got to keep finding something to dream about. What gets you out of the bed in the morning? Everything eventually comes to an end. Everything. Seasons change. Welcome to the fall. It just started this week here in Michigan, okay? Seasons change. The question is, can you change with the seasons of your life? That was good. I'm going to ask you guys to hook up my Cash App after I said that, okay? I'll give you that. Make sure you get my Cash App after that, okay? No, but.
So, tremendous career after football.
Yeah.
Author, motivational speaker, leadership consultant, life coach for the youth and adults and businesses and churches and sports teams, colleges and high schools.
Yeah.
You don't have a full plate, do you? You're,
I have
you
a
keep
fu-
going.
I have a full plate, but I'm passionate about what I do. And you know, we about all heard it that if you wake up and you do something you love, you don't feel like you don't feel like it's too much, or you don't feel like it's a weight. So I love adding value to people, and so that's what I get up to do every single day. I get up to add value to others.
Tell me about Power of Dad.
Power Dad is an organization I started 19 years ago. We work with fathers and fatherless boys, ages 11 through 18. At this point, we've reached over 1,500 fatherless boys here in the Great Lakes Bay region. Thank you, thank you. We've done that long enough now, over 19 years, that we've watched those young men grow up and become fathers, become husbands. And so what we know now is it worked. They're giving back to our community, out doing wonderful, phenomenal things.
You recently spoke to over 2,000 young men at a conference, and the title was, "What is your name?"
Yeah.
What is that about?
Yeah. Identity. That often, I know for me as an athlete, part of the thing that made me good was that I ran angry. But the problem was that my anger was rooted in the fact that I had issues with my father. And once I got some healing in my heart, the problem was I was no longer angry. And I had to find out who I was again, even as an athlete, because anger was fueling everything that I did. The problem is I didn't know how to cut the anger off, okay? And so what we talk about when we're talking about who am I, we talk about identity, and we talk about the steps that fathers have, the roles and the processes and the principles that fathers can do within children's life to make sure that they know who they are and that their identity is tied up in the right things in life.
I know you provide help in a lot of different categories: domestic violence, runaways, abuse, fatherhood, divorce.
Yeah.
Is there a problem or issue you haven't tackled? You've got a whole slug of them.
I'll tell you this, it depends on what ends up on my table. When you're just talking to people and they end up having a need, and you don't proclaim to know all the answers, but what you learn to do is you learn to get really good at listening to people. And you find out that's what most people want. They just want to be heard. Yeah, they want to be heard. Yeah.
So in 15 years, you've mentored over 500 young men. What's the single focus you want them to remember?
The number one thing I want them to remember is purpose. If you can find your purpose in life, you're going to do something great. And for me, being around great men in the world of sports, that's what it did for me. It helped me find my purpose. And maybe that purpose for a season was on the field, and then that purpose changed a little bit. But that's the way life goes for everybody. Eventually, the seasons change.
Tell me about your relationship with Brian Molitor.
Brian Molitor. So Brian Molitor, I love him. He's the guy that my kids call Grandpapa. And Brian, and what I love about it is I'm black, and if you haven't noticed that, and Brian Molitor is white, and yet we have built such a wonderful relationship. I met Brian Molitor my freshman year at Central Michigan's college, and we have lived life together ever since. He's been a great role model and a great mentor for me. Yeah.
So final question: if you could do it all over again, is there anything you would have changed?
Anything I would change? I don't think so. Here's the reason why. I always heard Jim Jones say, "Leave it all on the field." I always heard Coach Urick say, "Leave it all on the field." I always heard Coach Dramedy say, "Leave it all on the field." I think I left it all on the field. Now I'm just figuring out that now I play in the other NFL, the National Fatherhood League. And my goal is to leave it all on the field. Yeah.
Round of applause for Mr. Brian Pruitt.
Thank you, buddy. Thank you. Thank you.
A final round of applause for our 4 guests tonight. Thank you. You bet, buddy.
Can we gather? Can we take our seats? We just got 2 more things, and we're going to let you go. I know we've been here for a long time, so could you give me about 5 more minutes of your time, please? Please, could you retake your seats? Give us 5 more minutes, please. Oh boy. Just 5 more minutes, please. We got 2 announcements, and we're going to let you go. First, I would like to thank Jack Tanny for doing a great job. I would like to thank Coach Eiler, Craig Deal, John Decker, Brian Pruitt for sharing their life experiences. That was amazing. Thank you, guys. I just got one more thing. John Morey wants to make an announcement about the Hawkins Award, and I'm going to give some closing remarks. I'm going to let you go.
Okay, 2 things quick. We have our Saginaw County Sports Hall of Fame banquet on November 5th at the Horizon Conference Center. On page 5 of your program is the list of our Arthur Hill inductees into the Sports Hall of Fame. This year, 2 Arthur Hill graduates are going into the 2023 Sports Hall of Fame. Alfonso Boone played in the NFL for 10 years, and Jason Richard, second greatest basketball player after Craig Dill. And also, Hugh Bernruder is going into the Sports Hall of Fame this year. So the information tickets to the banquet on November 5th is right there in the program. Our second event is our 5th annual Hawkins Award. The Saginaw Club's Hawkins Award is Saginaw's Heisman Trophy. And we named this after Harry Hawkins, Harry Hawkins was the Arthur Hill Letterwinners' first president. Harry Hawkins played at the University of Michigan for Fielding Yost, and we are on our 5th annual. That's December 7th at the Saginaw Club. The information's on the back of your program for that event. And so that's all I got. Thanks, guys.
I want to thank everybody for coming. Congratulations on a great legacy. Thank you for letting me be your host or MC, whatever you want to call it. Remember, the door of the physical building is closing, but if you look around this room, our legacy can never die because we got great contributors to the Arthur Hill legacy, and it's up to us to keep it going and pass it along so we're never forgotten. God bless and good night.